Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Snowdon Deli. I'm Aaron Rand from CJD, along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette, and our special guest today, the leader of the Parti Québécois, Paul St-Pierre Plamondon. Thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you.
So, not much to talk about.
No, nothing.
Nope, not a whole lot. But I thought we'd start off with something relatively minor, like the Blue Book that you're now presenting on a gradual basis, I guess, chapter by chapter, which outlines, for all intents and purposes, what Quebec would look like, in your estimation, if and when it becomes a separate country, nation, whatever we want to call it. So let's start with that. And first of all, and it's interesting because I heard you the other day in Quebec City, basically making, and I don't hear this a lot, an appeal to Anglos. You said, I want Anglophones to vote PQ. Their interest is our interest. We all have the same interest to have our money not wasted and to direct it towards our need.
Yeah.
So let's start with that. First of all, why this direct appeal to or approach to Anglos, and what does it mean? What are our direct needs?
Well, first of all, I've always had that approach. So if we listen to interviews we've done together 2 years ago, I guess.
Yes.
I've always said that I hope that anglophones and allophones come together with, as Quebecers, around a few facts that are pretty obvious to me. So Canada is a very ideological regime that assumes that if you're a descendant of immigrants or if you just immigrated, you always want more immigration and uncontrolled immigration. And that anybody that would be Anglophone or allophone would agree with that. In the same way that you need to assume that all Anglophones and allophones in Quebec think that more and more religion everywhere and more religious fundamentalism is a good thing for social peace. Whereas I think that a vast portion of Anglophones are just like any other Quebecers thinking we need rules for social peace that prevents religion from taking a space that should be a common space. That's why we had a referendum, an internal referendum on prayers in public. So Canada takes half of our tax revenues and uses it as a duplication of what we're already doing in Quebec, and uses it more and more on missions that are purely ideological, and meanwhile we can't finance adequately hospitals and services to the population, and the taxes we're paying on a yearly basis are pretty high for the services we receive. So are our interests different on topics like stopping the waste of an unnecessary government? I think we have the same interests. I think people will agree with the Parti Québécois that not controlling our borders and our airports has been a disaster because Ottawa is so ideological. They were warned by their public servant that it would create a housing crisis like we've never seen. It happened, and Quebec disagreed, but they went with it anyway, and it's continuing in terms of asylum seekers. We don't have the control. So all those questions, as far, at least I hope, as far as I'm concerned, all those questions, Quebecers that are English-speaking or French-speaking have exactly the same questions and the same interests. So I'm campaigning for all Quebecers, hoping that we can come together and hoping that people, and maybe you can explain that to me, but why would Anglophones always vote for the same party forever? I just don't get it.
Well,
why would Anglophones not be Quebecers and make a choice based on their best interest? Why are we not all Quebecers?
The obvious answer to that question is their best interest is to stay in Canada, so that's a pretty obvious choice for why you want to vote.
Is it? If Canada openly works against your interest in terms of wasting money, policies that are a catastrophe, choices that are anti-democratic, even though we tell them, is it in the interest of Anglophones and allophones? I don't think so.
Well,
I think we have the same interest.
It's very interesting because last time you were on, and we had a lot of good comments about this, amongst Anglophones and allos, the big criticism has always been towards the CAQ, who've always scapegoated to curry the favor with others in the regions outside of Montreal. They've always scapegoated immigrants, they've scapegoated Anglos, they've scapegoated Allos. And you were very clear about the fact that in terms of preserving English institutions here and so on and so forth. But the interesting thing is I don't sense the animosity that used to exist in the old days of the PQ.
It's gone.
But
in general, among anglophones and francophones in Quebec,
right,
an animosity that would exist in the 70s, you don't find it anymore.
Well, you don't. That's what I'm saying. If you listen to Anglos or Allos today, the backlash has always been towards the CAQ because they just feel targeted. And
well, you'll notice lately that the CAQ is exactly like that.
Yes,
they target groups in hope of making a profit in voting intentions.
Right.
So they've done that with the unions, and then they've done that with the doctors, and they're doing that with several groups right now. And it's out of desperation, but it's also very harmful because there's no trust afterwards.
No.
Nobody can trust what's going to happen. There's no social peace because of that. But all that is coming to an end.
Yeah.
And I think we have a very good chance of forming the next government. Well, I would rather form it with anglophones and allophones than to have that kind of weird separation between Montreal and the rest of Quebec, as if Montreal's interest in terms of financing health services, having policies that are sound and democratic,
but I think
was different.
It's very interesting because you're still ahead in the polls and everything else. The Liberals were catching up. You might have had a Christmas present early with this dysfunction that's going on, where implosion we call it. But it looks like it's a very good bet you will be in power a year from now when election comes and all the rest. And then we will see what transpires in terms of reactions and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I mean, you're holding to your plan of holding a referendum in your first mandate, and I mean you've never backed away from that. But in terms of what's going on the social level here, I mean, Bill 2, for example, what are we doing? What's the plan here? This is crazy.
Bill 2 is another bill that was improvised. And so reforming the way we pay doctors in Quebec is a must. And the best practices are very easy to find. You go to British Columbia, you go to Europe, you go to Ontario, you have variations of the same principles. But the CAQ decided to have let's call it a war with doctors in order to wedge, because they're so low in the polls. And when I started the session, I said, one risk we have here is that the CAQ, out of desperation, starts making decisions that are very harmful based on that will to wedge as much as they can on anyone.
Exactly.
And that's what happened. So now you have doctors that are not willing to negotiate. I'm worried about that. I'd rather have something come out of that whole circus. And I understand doctors to be angry, but now that the government has recognized 4 or 5 points where it doesn't make any sense, and they're willing to negotiate, I think we need to negotiate before Christmas, so we have something that is functional as soon as possible, because just postponing will postpone and maintain dynamics that will be dysfunctional. And I don't think our health system in the state that we know, I don't think our health system is capable of having that instability for another year until we switch government. So I'd rather have something of a deal now that the government recognizes that it was a mess.
Do you scrap Bill 2 when you come into power, if you come into power?
Well, you need to make a new law to modify whatever is. So I'd rather have a negotiation and then have a second shot at it, saying if there's anything, because I told that on several occasions, I told the doctors, if something's not working in 1 year, do you really think our interest is to have a dysfunctional system? I mean, we'll fix whatever needs to be fixed, but in the best case scenario, before Christmas, there's some form of agreement and some changes on the part of government, and they seem at this point willing to do that because they know they lost their attempt at wedging in their favor. And in that sense, the population is pretty clever. I mean, you can't fool the population like the CAQ hoped. So we will reform whatever needs to be reformed, but we'd rather start with something useful being done after all this mess, some form of agreement.
I want to go back to what we started with. I brought up the Blue Book off the top. You talked about a couple of issues.
Yeah, we had a few things to say about the Blue Book.
Right. Yeah. So let's start first of all. You talk about immigration, and when I said about anglophones, francophones, whatever the difference might be, and you're saying many of us want the same thing.
Yep.
Yet I think most people look at this plan, at least the part of the Blue Book that we've so far heard about, and say to themselves, wait a sec, why are we focusing on this? Opening delegations in other parts of the world, doing our own trade, negotiating with the U.S., when there are so many problems, to Bill's point, at home right now. And people say, why is the PQ talking about this and not about the things that affect Quebecers on the ground every single day?
Two reasons for that. First of all, if your program is to create a country, I mean, you need the answers. If you can't answer basic things about how that country would be, how it would work, you're not serious. So I'm not publishing this because I think I'm going to make a political gain in the next poll. I'm publishing this because if you're serious, you do your homeworks, and your homeworks must be evaluated by the population with time. The second thing that is important, take diplomacy. So global affairs, Canadian foreign policy costs 10 billions a year. That means that out of our pocket in Quebec, we finance 2 billions for those services that don't represent Quebec's companies or Quebec's interests, because Canada is a mix of competing interests. And internationally, hence, we don't have our own marketing, our own brand, our own promotion of our companies.
But aren't we included in that when we talk to other countries and other businesses about investing?
I mean, I lived in Denmark, Sweden, Belgium, Norway, Bolivia, England, and no, we're not. People in Scandinavia don't even know anything about Quebec, whereas we know, at least from hockey, their national team, and from IKEA, we knew a few things about Sweden. But my point here is, you're asking me why you're doing this if we have problems financing healthcare or having roads because we're going to save 1 billion. The plan here is to slash into waste and an unnecessary government. So the plan we put forward is to say, listen, we're already spending 2 billion a year on a representation that doesn't represent our interests. Let's make a budget at 1 billion, and let's save the other billion for healthcare or for tax income reductions. But it's about slashing where the waste is the more obvious, that is the federal government.
So
with 1 billion,
competing against Canada, in essence, to get contracts or trade. At the same time as Quebec, you're saying, in your vision of Quebec, that we be out there for ourselves, Canada will be out for Canada, and we're basically fighting against each other.
We're not fighting, we're representing different companies and industries. You have it right now. Right now with Trump, the negotiations are on many topics, but not on Quebec wood. But that's because there's no Alberta wood on the table. There are other industries. So it's not about fighting. I expect actually provinces after the independence of Quebec, or maybe after the independence of Alberta, that would be before Quebec's independence. In any case, I expect provinces to just talk to each other and agree that we want as much business, as much easygoing business as possible. I expect them to cooperate directly, but in all respect of their parliaments, instead of having the abuse of power that comes from a very few people in Ottawa, not respecting the will of governments in each province. But to your question, having our own foreign affairs, our own representation, is just like any other country in the world. It's simply the principle of representing your own interests and not letting your neighbor deciding what would be your interest. Mm-hmm. And it also means saving a lot of money, because what we're putting forward is 1 billion instead of 2, and that billion that is saved will be reinvested in services that are problematic right now.
I know you're always asked the question, I know you have an answer with respect to this. Are we a net beneficiary or a net payer as far as, money from the rest of Canada, equalization payments? Yeah. You maintain that we pay in more than we get back, right?
It's even. It's slightly advantageous to be independent if you continue all current expenses under the government of Canada. So if you have an independent country of Quebec that says, I'm going to spend every dime exactly like the federal is spending right now, you are getting 15 billions more than you send to Ottawa on a yearly basis. But what we need to understand here is that that 15 billion is debt, because this year the government of Canada is indebting Quebec by 17 billion.
Okay.
Right.
So any government, of course, can choose to have 90 in revenue and to spend 105 by borrowing. And that's what Canada doing right now. It's borrowing in our name for the amount that we receive in excess. What I think is going to happen, and I'm going to come back to your podcast one day, I hope, with the exact calculations of what we will slash in terms of waste. But I think that we will have an independent Quebec that will not make the same spending decisions than the federal government, that is, in which case we'll save money. And I don't have the means to make that exact calculation right now, but with the means of the state, I'll come back here with an exact calculations of the savings.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowdon Delicatessen, where we are. 75 years in business, the hub of Montreal's greatest smoked meat, plus carnotzel, potato latkes, and the famous Snowdon Deli party sandwiches. That's the Snowdon Delicatessen.
The fear of many is that we become very vulnerable if we separate from the state's point, from the point of view of the states. President Trump has big ambitions, lofty ambitions. I mean, Quebec, an independent Quebec for him, I don't know that he would respect in the same sense, because I would think that the first thing he would want to do is, I'm sure he'd love it if we use the US dollar on a certain level, but he basically, it's a dangerous situation, only that he would think that he could come. He doesn't have any respect for Canada. I don't know.
Okay, well, thank you for saying that, because it's not as if he's respecting Canada.
No,
it's not as if the Canadian Army can stop the American Army if they decide. I mean, so
you not worry about him trying to, take Quebec. I mean, Quebec has a lot of advantages for him. We've got, hydroelectric power. We've got everything. We've got natural resources.
It's always been the case.
I know, but if he senses that we're weak on a certain level, he would come in and pounce. That doesn't ever scare you?
I mean, there are two things. First of all, there is a fear campaign that is irrational, and it's normal every time there's a willingness to make Quebec a country. The arguments from the federal is pure fear, irrational fear. Right. So we had in 1 week an invasion of Russia, an invasion of the Americans, giving the Quebec to Donald Trump. I mean, the next step is an invasion of aliens.
But why is it invasion, to Bill's point about the U.S.?
So that's one thing.
Why would he not come into Quebec if he's ready to annex Canada? Why would he not annex Quebec?
If he wants to annex Canada, he can do it right away, and there's no way we can defend it. So he's not doing it. And the idea that an independent Quebec or an independent Alberta would not negotiate exactly as Canada is kind of negotiating right now, because in terms of being weak, what we saw under Carney is basically provinces doing whatever with no coordination, acting as if they're countries. So Daniel Smith went to Florida, negotiate directly with Donald Trump.
Right. Okay.
Doug Ford started TV ads without consulting anyone, not Quebec for sure, and it translated into an extra 10% in tariffs in Quebec. And then you have the Prince Edward Island, who has its own team going around the U.S. So you already have a very disoriented and it's just separate interests that are doing their own thing. And Mark Carney, that has no bargaining power, that had very clear promises about what he would do in terms of negotiating with Donald Trump, he respected none of those promises. So we're as weak as it gets, and an independent Quebec would not be in a better or a worse position, but at least it would be our own diplomacy and our own voice in Washington negotiating with maybe a tone of voice that is not as arrogant as Justin Trudeau, because I think part of the problem is that apart from showing the colors of his socks, Justin Trudeau irritated the world by being a mix of very poor intellectual capacity and very high arrogance. And I think there's a price in terms of diplomacy with the Americans and with other European and countries around the world. So our own diplomacy would be more modest, less arrogant, and I think smarter in terms of representing our own interests.
But you throw out the difference, right? There'd be no guarantee of the difference, better or worse. It's just another nation, country, province, whatever, trying to cut us.
There is no guarantee, indeed, of better or worse. It's just that it's our decision in our interest. That's the principle of democracy.
Right.
Democracy is about deciding for yourself, with your people, not having a domination from another people on your political will.
Right.
It's just that.
Okay. But you've thrown out the possibility amongst three of perhaps using U.S. currency in the case of a separate Quebec. Do you think a guy like Trump hears that and thinks, aha, they're ready to join us?
No, we evaluated three options for currency.
Right.
So keeping the Canadian dollar, having the American dollar,
or a Quebec dollar,
creating our own currency.
Right.
And the logical, and if you read about Nobel Prizes that evaluated the monetary policy in Canada, former governors of the Central Bank of Canada saying it's a suboptimal policy because the regions are so different. When you make a policy, it's always problematic somewhere in Canada. So the right answer from an economic standpoint is to create your own bank. You'll make money out of it, but most importantly, you'll have monetary policies that reflect your economy and not Alberta's or Ontario's economy. But we never concluded to the American dollar. We concluded to gradually go towards our own currency, as Scandinavian countries do, as many countries do, of course, but to do it very slowly with the financial markets. So we don't make it a political thing. We will create a commission that is basically financial experts and members of the financial markets, telling us at what pace we go towards, and even giving them the power to change our mind if they think the risk is too high. So we're going to go very easy with the end target that is to have our own monetary policy, because in the first year what you want is economic acceleration, so you need stimulus, and you want stability on as many aspects as you can, so you don't move right ahead, in which case you keep the Canadian currency for a certain period of time, and you work with the financial markets in determining what's the right calendar and what are the circumstances. Because when we publish right now, we don't know the circumstances in 5 years or 10 years from now. So we'll work with experts.
Are you not worried? I think back as I hear you say this, and I know you've mentioned this before, Pauline Marois, if we go back to 2013, a lot of people look back to that particular day when she talked about a Quebec currency, a Quebec military, as the turning point for the PQ to have lost the next election. That just either frightened people or didn't make sense to people, yet you want to do the same thing. Why? Do you not learn a lesson from that?
I don't make politics for the next sounding pole. So if the right answer is what I'm explaining, and if we detailed every part of that reasoning, thinking if we want to get richer, and if we want to get our things together to have a functional healthcare system, we need to do this and that. We don't give the answers based on the next poll. I'm ready to take a hit. So long I believe that I'm giving the right answer if we want a better future. I'm willing to... I've done that before too, on several topics. People told me, yeah, but if you do that, you might lose support and so on. I just do my thing based on public interest, our best evaluation of public interest. And as you see, I'm campaigning towards all Quebecers, saying we need to trust ourselves. We need to be entrepreneurial. We need to seize opportunities instead of fearing consequences of telling the truth. If telling the truth entails a bit of courage, well, any entrepreneur will tell you, or any Olympic athlete will tell you, if you want to build something important or aim high, you need to take a part of risk and you need to make efforts, and it will pay off.
To be fair, though, your truth, the word truth, that's your truth. That's not necessarily how things would play out, because no one knows how things would play out.
No.
We're guessing how this might work based on your plan on the Blue Book going forward.
Determining a public policy is never about certainty of the impact of the public policy.
Right.
It's to determine among all options which option is the most likely to be useful in the public interest.
Okay.
So that's what I mean by telling the truth. It's not a objective and a universal truth, but it's about being honest about your conclusions, not hiding your conclusions because you fear taking any risk or the next poll.
Federalists here are always saying, well, the reason you're doing so well is because they're parking their votes with you because they just don't want the CAQ to come back. And then, like, all of a sudden the Liberals are on the comeback trail and all the rest. Do you think that that's really accurate, like in terms of like good government? I mean, you would think that that's the issue at hand more than anything.
I think what people underestimate among the analysts, and sometimes those analysts are so close to the latest poll,
right?
Like they lose the overall picture. Having a society project whereby you create a country and you go out there in the world saying we're open to business and we exist and we want to create new relations and so on, brings a lot of talent and human capital in politics. Because it's not a period where people spontaneously think, oh, if I want to do something that looks interesting, safe, and fun, I'm going to do politics. Everywhere in the Western world right now, you have, I think, a difficulty in terms of recruiting people in politics. But if you have a society project and you have a vision, and that vision is driven by hope that we can do better, hope to get out of a colonial regime that is outdated, hope to get out of really absurd policies in terms of immigration, social peace, waste, that brings people in politics, such as Alex Boissonneau, such as Pascal Paradis, Catherine Gentilcore, and you will see more of that. And that, I think, is interesting for people following politics, saying, well, I'm curious about why they're so determined that we become a country, but I have to say those people are smart and they work well. They never come out with a job that is not well prepared. Like, we do our job well, and we're capable of attracting strong brains, strong people in politics. I think that plays out as to why people, for the past 2 years and a half now, choose us more than any other political party, even though we are very ambitious and we're very outspoken about our ambitions.
I hear you when you say, we just talked about polls, and you say, well, you know what, you have a plan, you're not going to worry about the polls or what their effect might be. But at the end of the day, there's a couple of obvious questions here. You can't ignore polls entirely in politics. Mm-hmm. We know that a couple of things. Support for separation has always been, say, in the last 30 years, ballpark 35 to 40%. Yeah. We also know in polls that people who would vote for you, for Vote PQ, don't want to have a referendum or vote for separation. Yet you're pushing forward with this idea, knowing that if the polls are correct, and it's not a poll, it's a continuation of polls, you would potentially not be able to go ahead with this idea because most people don't want you to, even the ones that support your party. So why keep going ahead? Why keep pushing forward when you know that?
Okay, let's take the example of climate change. Let's say that I'm before scientists that unanimously tell me if we don't do anything about energy, the planet will blow up and will not be able to grow crops and feed people on a certain period of time because of this and that consequences. And let's say afterwards I'm faced with polls that tell me people don't want any change in their environment or energy, and they want to keep on using petroleum as much as they can. That's what the poll is telling you. At the end of the day, you need to ask yourself, why am I in politics? What's the purpose of making all those sacrifices, because it's not good quality of life, and I could make more money as a lawyer? What's the purpose of making politics if you are not telling what you think is the best answer because of a certain poll? Okay. So I perfectly understand, and I follow those polls attentively, but at the end of the day, I trust that we will bring people together around a few basic principles of bringing everyone together and creating something new that is better than the decline imposed by Canada, a decline that is economic. We're the last countries of OCDE in terms of economic growth in the past 10 years because of silly policies. And we're in a situation of always being on the defensive with that government that is, in my eyes, abusing its powers all the time, not respecting its own constitution. So that's what I think. And I think Anglophones, I hope they will have the same reading of the situation, that we actually will be better off managing our own business. But it's about trusting us, trusting our capacity, trusting in our capacity. And sometimes, unfortunately, the history of Quebec is maybe not seeing Quebec in a positive light, not trusting that you're capable of doing things that is being done with so many countries and so many nations worldwide. Why are we not capable of doing those things? I mean,
last referendum was a very long-winded question for sovereignty association and all the rest. Yeah. I've heard people speculating that you're playing with three different like in terms of, someone came up and told us that you had, one of our guests said you had three different ideas for questions.
Oh, no.
Would it be a very... one of our guests, I remember, I don't know which one, but the point being, would it be a clear-cut question? Would it dance around?
The truth is, we're nowhere near writing that question.
No, I understand.
So anyone that came here and told you they had like some insider information,
that they were toying with three different options.
But why not? It's a simple question. Either you want to choose to separate from Canada or you don't. So why are you nowhere near writing a question?
Because you need a committee and you need to do things correctly, and it would really be ahead of schedule to work on that while we're 6 elected members of parliament right now trying to form the government. So there's a few things we can do right now. That is answering questions on each topic. Mm-hmm. And at some point we'll get to that part. What is the question? But I mean, with the size of the Parti Québécois right now, we're not the government and we're the smallest of all opposition parties.
For now.
So, I mean, it's like taking bites
right.
In a rhythm that you can handle. And so it will come, but right now it would be false to say that we worked. But the question will be indeed quite simple, I think.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Let me move ahead down the road. Let's say it's 2 years from now, 3 years, 5 years from now. There's an election, obviously, next fall. You don't win the election. Does Paul St-Pierre Plamondon stay involved in Quebec politics, or is that dream done for you and you move on?
I've never thought about that. I mean, I work for the only people I have a duty towards is the members of the Parti Québécois. I don't owe anything to anyone. So if that would happen, I would just go back to these members and ask them what's up with that. Yeah. What do you think? I mean, I have 3 kids at a very young age. It's not an easy life. But at the same time, I'm proud of what we're doing. So for me, it's public service, and so long I'm needed, I'll serve. And I never really thought about all those possibilities. In my mind, I prepare a government of the Parti Québécois in the best of my capability.
I respect your passion that this is what your dream is, and like I say, total respect for that on that level. But if the population says no, could you just go on and give good government in a non-independent Quebec? Would you?
Sure. I mean, for me,
his question.
People think sometimes that being in favor of independence of Quebec is like a religion or some kind of ideology.
Well, it is on a certain level.
No, not as far as I'm concerned. I mean, my understanding of it is that the basis is public service.
Right.
And if your will is to have a positive impact on society, then you're forced to take stances on all sorts of topics, such as Bill number 2 and all sorts of problems there is. And I am in favor of independence of Quebec because I come to the conclusion that it's the best and only way for stopping a decline in all aspects of our society and bringing confidence and velocity to our businesses and to our international representation. So that's my conclusion. I don't make further calculations.
Like my impression, Anglos, Francos, Allos, that people like you. I mean, they find you very easy to listen to.
Yeah, until you bring up separation.
Not so
much for many of them.
But why is that?
I don't know. But I asked my radio audience when I told them what you had said about Anglos, and I will tell you that 99% of people said, absolutely not. I will not vote PQ. Why? Because I don't want Quebec to separate from Canada.
But Canada works against our interests.
Well, they don't think
all
so.
of our. It's a fact.
They don't think so.
Yeah,
they think that we're represented on the
job.
world stage when Canada's talking to other countries.
No, they represent
Quebec
other
gets
interests than
mentioned.
our own, and we're missing money to finance what's essential to the population. So, those facts are concerning all Quebecers, including Anglos and Allos and Francos. It's the same, and I hope I will convince Anglophones to be 100% Quebecers. Because the fact is, we are in the same boat, in the same society, and we're dealing with the same problems, and we're dealing with the same absurd Canadian policies that are imposed on us, in which case, we should be together. That's my point. So I hope that by explaining in the best of my capacity why Canada is working against our interests, why Canadian policies are absurd in terms of all the aspects we've covered, and there are so many more, and why we would be better off creating a country together in terms of friendship, in terms of momentum and social peace. I hope we will achieve that.
But you understand not everybody agrees with you.
No, but I think I can change their mind. I mean, we're not in a colonial regime mentality anymore. I mean, it's not about Anglophones and Francophones that had those colonial relations 200 years ago. I mean, I think we're beyond that, and we're basically all Quebecers. We're basically in the same society.
You're right.
Well,
So in which case...
Whether or not we agree on separation, we are all 100% Quebecers. Whether we agree with you or not.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
No, that we are all Quebecers, and based on that, we should look at our common interests with regards to Canada without a bias of thinking that Canada is always working for us or protecting us against the bad Québécois.
Yeah.
I mean, because a large part of the Canadian doctrine is to induce fear and categorize people among communities. So multiculturalism is basically telling you, you're Anglo, and this guy is a Franco, and beware of the Franco.
And this is precisely what Anglos, Allos are feeling with the current CAQ government, that divide and conquer. Like these are the bad guys. Yeah, well, I agree.
Let's get out of that. In which case,
I'm saying that's to your advantage here, because basically, I don't hear people saying that you're a bad guy, that you're wanting to. Your message is well taken, that we're all the same, we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, but Canada will have institutions and funding to create identity, but based on ethnocultural identities, and induce fear about Quebec.
Well, that's
and
politics.
it's very unhealthy. Yeah, but it's unhealthy.
Of course it's unhealthy.
We need to get out of
getting
that.
that inducing fear. I know you keep saying that. I don't think many Canadians, certainly not the ones I talk to, feel that the federal government is inducing fear of Quebec or Quebecers. But that's just a difference of opinion. I want to ask you one last thing.
Read under Quebec bashing on Wikipedia. You'll have a good ride. I mean,
is there
a
Quebec bashing?
I want to ask one other question that always comes up, which is this: if Quebec can separate, right, from Canada, can Montreal separate from Quebec?
No, legally speaking, no, and there's no interest in doing that neither. So, I mean...
I'm sorry, there's what?
There's no interest in doing that. What is the interest?
The interest is from people who say just that. If Quebec can separate, I don't want that to happen. I like the things the way they are now. As a Montrealer, we're the biggest city in the province. Can we do the same thing?
Yeah. No, because the integrity of a territory means that you have a territory. So territorial integrity, based on international law, means that you have an entity that has a territory. So if a city says, okay, I separate, it's not a state, it's not a nation, so international law applies. But apart from those legal considerations, for people to conclude that we could not work a country on our own to the point where you try to have a part of the island of Montreal connected to a country that is, 150 kilometers away, because the border at Rivière-Baudette is a good 100 and something kilometers away, and try to work this out. I mean, they've done that with Berlin,
right,
against the communists, but like the opinion you must have of Quebecers must be very unfair to think that we will not work a fair and sound nation, country, and government altogether.
If I might add, though,
that's my vision. So there's no need and there's no logic in doing that anyway, but from a strict legal standpoint, it's not possible neither.
That thinking stems from the fact that the way it is viewed in Montreal, Anglo-Franco, whatever, is that the present government has pretty much ignored Montreal and knows full well that it can govern, it can maintain a majority in the National Assembly by sort of pitting the regions against the city. So often Montrealers of every stripe, by the way, of every language, of every culture, feel like they're not part, in a lot of senses, of Quebec as we know it, that it's, it's one versus the other.
I understand that.
And that's where that thinking comes from. So, I mean, how do you get out there and explain to Montrealers of all stripes that we're all the same, we all belong to the same group?
I think they'll need to just try a government of the Parti Québécois under my rule.
Oh my!
No, but it's the same. It's the only answer possible. Because no matter what I say, I think my vision is very clear about what it means to be a Quebecer. Is that we all work together based on our common interests, and we work towards social peace. And that social peace is threatened by policies of the federal that are unsustainable and absurd. That's my vision, and that's what I have to tell people. But until they try a government of the Parti Québécois, it will be hard for me to convince everyone that it's actually going to work. So I understand that people will say, well, it makes sense, but I'd like to try it. I'd like to have a shot at it.
So your slogan will be, try it, you'll like it.
Yes.
You know what? René Lévesque.
Yes.
All right.
René Lévesque, way back when.
Imagine.
That's on all the billboards, yeah.
All the billboards in Montreal. Try it, you'll like it.
I heard words like that from René Lévesque.
It's very Lévesque-like.
Yes, and I got to tell you that he was well liked.
Of course he was.
Amongst all.
And in other provinces too.
I know that. He was a decent...
So you are right to say that the doctrine I'm putting forward right now is actually getting back to the sources of the Parti Québécois. We are the 70s Parti Québécois. We're exactly 6, like they were before they got into power in 76. We have the same very rooted democratic mentality of public service, and we have the same mentality of not being for sale. Like, you can't buy our stance. You can't influence whatever lobby comes to us. We are perfectly free, and we give a direction exactly like in the 70s. So in that sense, I think that's why I have hope in terms of bringing people together.
So did Lévesque.
Yes, in that era, we were successful in doing that, and the level of confidence of everyone got much better. But, it remains to be done. I'm not selling the... La peau de l'ours avant de l'avoir tué. How do you say that? Selling the skin of the bear before having shot the bear.
That's
Can you
my
say
work
that?
in English.
No. But what's the saying in English? There has to be something.
Don't shoot yourself in the foot.
No, that's not the same.
Cart before the horse.
Don't put the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
So one step at a time, I will try to show that.
Okay.
That we can get back to that doctrine.
We have to wrap up. I just will say, because now you just brought up saying, which is an interesting idea. This is the PQ you feel of the 1970s, more similar to that than it is to what it's been lately.
Of course.
I will just, wrap up by saying, what happened in the 1970s after the PQ.
Yeah.
The businesses that left Quebec, the people that left Quebec, the people that never came back to Quebec.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a discussion for another day.
Well, 2 things on that. It's one of the best government we ever had in terms of public policies in the history of Quebec. Second, there's been more companies moving from Montreal to Toronto under the Liberals that had no policy on those topics than during those cycles of the Parti Québécois. And third, I'd like to think that history is cumulative in the sense that all those events will lead to a result that makes sense and that is positive.
Okay.
So I think we will end up, after all those experiences with the country. And that once we will have given birth to that country, things from the past that are a consequence of a colonial regime, that is division, will end. And that's my vision. And that's, I hope,
we will leave it at that. Mr. Plamondon, first of all, I thank you so much for the time. I appreciate you coming by. That takes care of another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast. We'll see you again soon.